Welcome to Reclamation Time Live at 4 o'clock UTC or 4 p.m. GMT every second Tuesday of the month. Salvo's podcast for reclaimers, architects, designers, and reuse lifestylers. For anyone who remembers the old printed Salvo, we're bringing it back this time as a conversation. We're broadcasting live on X Spaces, and a recorded version will be available on Spreaker, Apple, Spotify, and Google. You're welcome to listen in on X Spaces, and where you can also join in or text your comments. This edition is sponsored by Salvo Reclamation Surveys, which were started in 1995 as reclamation audits of material removed during demolition and refurbishment, and these days the carbon emissions avoided are also included. We have produced them for discerning clients, eco-friendly developers and architects, engineers, landscapers, and private individuals. Brian.
Hi, Thornton.
Today's format, for those listeners, is a quick resume of a couple of things that happened at the last podcast we did, and followed by Brian Murphy of Green Building Encyclopedia, who's going to run us through some of the useful things that that does. So, last month, do you remember we talked about the National Planning Policy Framework? And how I was a bit deprecating. Well, I was. It was supposed to be the policy which encouraged circular economy, reclamation, and reuse of building material, according to the letter that we had, or the email that we had from the government when we asked them about this. Well, I actually did eventually find a very tenuous chain of footnotes on that document. When you consider that there were several pages about minerals planning guidance and how material from demolition can be recycled by being crushed and reused that way. You would have thought they could have spared a couple of words to say that reuse is a better option always to recycling, but they didn't manage to do that. Anyway, so there are some tenuous links. Basically, footnotes. One of the footnotes mentions the UK government waste policy, and if you click from the NPPF to the UK government waste policy, that then has some footnotes which link to the European Union Waste Framework Directive, which is an old doc that we've known and love from several years ago, which also does not recommend reuse at all, but it does recommend preparing for reuse. It's about as far as they can go. So there's a tenuous link in case anybody wants to see it. Secondly, we've got this thing called the Chatham House Rule. So what we're going to try to do with our podcast is allow people to repeat things that are said, but ask them not to actually attribute who said it. So that's going to be a bit tricky with me and Brian, because we're the only two people who are talking. But there you are. That's what we're asking people to do. So the podcast, you can say, you're welcome to say, it was said on our podcast that blah, 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 but just don't say who said it, just in case there's anything libelous or in any way not correct. Another thing which came up in the previous podcast was about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and I couldn't remember which one it was. It's actually SDG 12, which talks about reuse and recycling. And I've got the link, which I'll put in the notes, from that particular doc, which it mentions recycling and reuse right at the end. So it's reduce and then recycle and then reuse in that order, which is not a good thing really. But more importantly, that's been copied. That phrase has been copied on an awful lot of government documents around the world. Reuse and recycling carries the same weight on that document. and quite obviously, at least in Europe and in the UK, reuse has a priority over recycling, and we'd like to see the United Nations SDG 12 also do the same thing. So anyway, that link will be there. Brian.
Yeah, is there any chance that the SDG 12 can be updated as time progresses? Can you make a kind of statement to them and seek their modification?
I've asked about this, and there are mechanisms. It's not exactly a democratic body, the United Nations, but national governments all have a say. But we in Glasgow at COP27, was it last 2 years ago? We asked if we could go there and present our case to the UN, who are all there in Glasgow, about decoupling, reclamation, recycling, and reuse. And they turned us down. I mean, they had quite a few people who wanted to go, obviously, but they did turn us down. So we weren't able to do it there. But there are so at national government level, there are various committees and stuff like that that talk about these kind of things, which we could try. But the kind of there's in every country there are United Nations representatives who you can speak to as an ordinary person. So I will try and contact that ordinary person and see where I can get on this particular issue.
Yeah, you just have to keep on pestering until eventually they hear you, don't you?
Yeah, you're right. But I'm not sure that they will understand what I'm talking about. And if they do, I'm not sure that the multinationals and the big conglomerates in whose interest selling new material is, they would rather recycle, because if things are recycled, you destroy them, basically. You can't reuse them if they're recycled. So that's what they would like to see. The UN ought to be encouraging all countries, 200 countries around the planet, to be reusing, and a lot of them do. But the major countries, like the US and in the European Union, have a slightly more circumspect view on reuse, and they much prefer to recycle.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things, so many aspects to this conversation that need to be kind of hammered home, because as soon as you start recycling, you start adding more chemistry or more plastics in order to bind things together. And they're all unhealthy materials. They've all got to be phased out as best we can. There's just so much kind of the whole business about one planet living seems to be ignored. If you're going for a one planet lifestyle, then you've got to start reclaiming, reusing, and focusing on those things which are low impact. And as I keep saying, when I present to architects, we have to present in a very visual way. There's an argument for putting together some pretty good graphic presentations which explain all of the reasons why reclaim is more important than recycle. If you need help, I would imagine that ACAN and their team of graphic design and Leti teams of graphic design teams would probably be willing to contribute their abilities to help you to present something if that was needed.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And because Britain does have a priority of reuse over recycling, that's the way their info would be structured, especially in London, because London is ahead of the pack in terms of policy on reuse. Their policy aims to reclaim and reuse material, although they don't call it reclaim and reuse, they call it recovery, or they use other words.
The wrong words.
The languages are different, but they definitely. That's a good. I will bear that in mind when I if I send emails to people?
What I'd make a suggestion that because we've got Future Build coming up, and ACAN do seem to get a kind of a fair chunk of free presence there. It might be worth trying to join up and go and meet ACAN on site at Future Build, which will be the first week of March normally, and see if we can kind of make some headway, because they they're beginning to kind of, they're focusing on the energy and the carbon, but they need to also engage in the resource efficiency. And so if they aren't already doing so, then they need to be encouraged to do so. Yeah.
Right. Well, if I'm around, and I could certainly try and get there, and we can meet up with somebody. It would be good to have a chat with them.
Okay, we'll try and do that. I'll try and make contact with them in advance and let them know that we'd like to have a conversation with them. Okay.
Brilliant. Did you say, who is it at Future Build that you wanted to talk? Is it ACAN?
Yeah, ACAN tend to have a presence there. They get some kind of good exhibition space for free, and they've been running some brainstorming sessions and exhibitions, and I think maybe some competitions. So they have a big area. They have a big wall on which they can get people to engage with them. And it's primarily a recruitment activity as well as a dissemination activity. So ACAN is Architects Climate Action Network, who came about from about October 2019, when Greta was asking the adults to come and join the school kids and meet in London, and ACAN appeared there. I kind of joined in with them for a while, but they moved on to WhatsApp, and I lost the technological connection with them. So they're still doing some good work, producing lots of interesting videos, CPD material, and reports, and challenging government and challenging the ARB on various issues.
Are you going to have a stand? Is GPD?
No, I'm not going to have a stand. I haven't got any money, so. But I'll walk the floor for 3 days and just learn as much as I can. I don't attend any of the seminars because I think the acoustics are usually pretty bad and too distracting, and I'd just much rather go and meet people and learn stuff.
And whereabouts is that?
It's at Excel, which is in the Docklands. Custom House, and it's on 3 days, and it's usually the Tuesday to Thursday, and it's usually the first week of March. Well,
if you're there and I'm there, maybe we could do a bit of the next podcast live from
absolutely. I've always wanted to do something like that, stick a crocodile on my shoulder and stick a camera on it and then walk around and talk to people.
Well, you won't get a camera, but we can easily do a microphone.
Well, of course, the iPhone has all the technology you need. Just stick it on your shoulder and off you go. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, let's plan to do that. I think it'd be good fun.
Okay. Right. So your extensive load of web. Well, three websites.
Yeah. One of them is sort of moribund. It's probably the wrong word, but
which one is moribund?
Learning, Green Building Learning. We started to set it up in during COVID, and unfortunately, my director of the learning website got COVID and got it bad, and so it kind of went quiet for quite some time. And I'm now going to it was going to be about live discussions, webinars, visits, and a whole bundle of other things, workshops. But unfortunately, it stopped almost as quickly as COVID arrived. So it needs to be revived, and I'm planning to start putting all my CPD material on there, which, there's over 1,000 hours of CPD material on sustainable construction to go up there. So yeah, it will if I have the time, when I have the time, because the calculators are consuming all of my time at the moment.
Okay.
But
well, do you want to start with the calculator then?
Let's click on. Let's get another screen up. That one. Okay, so the calculator. It's
So the domain. Let me just read the domain. It's Green Building Calculator, all one word.
Yeah, that's
.uk.
it. HTTPS without the WWs.
Right.
And so we currently have version 2 of the Green Building Calculator for new build, which can also do retrofit. But subsequently, we've developed another version of the calculator, standalone, which is for retrofit only. And I realise.
Can you just explain what the calculator actually
Yes.
calculates?
So it's primarily driven by the need for carbon calculation. But when I was teaching embodied energy, embodied carbon, sequestered, and also in use energy, in use carbon. And the best way for students to kind of work on that was to actually model the designs in their studio. So I developed a calculator over 12 weeks for them to calculate each of their individual buildings. And so, but in order to do that, in order to do carbon calculation, you've got to start with U value calculation so that you know that you've got enough material in order to achieve the U values. And then from then you work out the embodied energy, embodied carbon, sequestered carbon of the materials that each of the elements are made of. So it starts with U value calculations for every element of the building. And architects have got into this habit of not doing their own U value calculations. They rely on manufacturers. So this is a way of trying to bring some skills back to the profession by introducing them to calculators, which they ought to have learned, but many of them haven't done. Even on year 5 of their education, they still haven't heard about U values. So, so in order to make a U value, you have to have lots of component parts of all of the elements of the building. And then you choose materials in place of those components. And then the calculator feeds the cells and then does some number crunching with your material choices and your thicknesses, and then does some embodied energy, embodied carbon, sequestered carbon calculations. And in future, it will also have whole life cycle assessment number crunching, which is, big and complicated, and actually almost a waste of time, in my view, because getting down to the microscopic numbers that LCA and EPD provide, and then trying to multiply them up by the quantities of materials in the building. It's all big and complicated and tiresome, and no one actually learns very much from the process. The primary thing is for people to understand the environmental impact, i.e. the embodied carbon at the moment, focus on the carbon because that's the major problem that we've got to deal with.
So have you got two things here? It seems, from what you're saying, that you've got process carbon, the cost of heating a building, which with using fossil fuels or whatever, and you've got embodied energy. So there are two.
In fact, there are 6 aspects to it because we've got a built-in bill of quantities as well. So you've got cost of building, cost of living in the building, running it, heating it. You've got the embodied energy in the materials, the embodied carbon in the materials, and the in-use energy and the in-use carbon by keeping the building warm. And if you have all 6 bits of information in front of you, you can make some intelligent decisions. And the idea behind part of the calculator is that you actually show the percentage of heat loss through each of the elements of the building, so that people can begin to see, right, that's where I'm losing the heat. And it's all usually through the windows. And, 7% of the external envelope might be squandering 75% of the energy. So you can see that that's where you need to spend money, where you need to invest and not save money. The whole of the construction industry is focused on how cheap can we build it. And actually what you want to do is focus on how much do you need to invest in order to make this building cheap to live in.
And is this something which can be used by DIYers and private individuals?
It can be, but it will be a bit challenging if they're not familiar with the terminology. And one of the things that I've started building is the jargon busters in Green Building Encyclopedia and the hyperlinks from the cells of the calculator into the pages of the website, so that people can learn what the words mean if they don't already know. The retrofit calculator, which is now still not launched yet, but very, very close to ready to go. It's designed for homeowners, so it can be self-builders or people who are, or even for surveyors assisting homeowners. And the idea there is that there are some ready-made house types, and you choose the house type that closest matches your building, and it fills the calculator with 100 bits of data from English and Scottish national statistics, so that it's already halfway to providing you with all the answers you need, and you can make some minor changes to floor areas, window areas, and the like, to make it more specific to your house. And then it provides you with embodied energy, embodied carbon, cost, and the like. So it's much easier for the self-builders and the homeowners, but I want to build that same flexibility back into the new build version, so it's more and more useful for every audience.
If somebody's using reclaimed material, is there a simple way they can?
So if you're choosing a brick, or if you're choosing brick as one of the component parts of the wall, you can choose from the data sets. When you in a particular cell where you're choosing a brick, you can choose a reclaimed brick, and then it will give you different statistics, different numbers to feed the calculator to give you different values. But in the retrofit one, and in due course in the new build, we've also built in this additional function of existing building, previous interventions, and new interventions. And whenever there's a material choice, it can be, are you looking at demolition, or are you looking at new build, or are you looking at refurbishment? Are you looking at reclaim and reuse? Are you looking at reclaim and reuse off-site? So there's all of those kind of choices, which will feed the calculator with a different function. And so,
how much will it cost for people to use this?
It's very low cost entry. It's a one-off price, or it's a seasonal, annual subscription service. But for a student, it's £4.88. And for a large practice, it's £98.88. And the idea is just to try and get people to start using it. If I start charging what it's cost me to build it, no one's going to start using it. So I just want to get more people using it and becoming carbon literate, which is the primary aim, is to get people to understand and intuitively know, through having done a few projects, to analyze them and realize which materials are the low impact materials, that they begin to kind of make intuitive decisions instead of relying on the BREEAM assessor sitting in the corner saying, "Oh, well done, chaps, 87%. For what? We don't know," which is often.
This morning we were sent a blog which is being written by a salvage dealer who is building a house in his yard from reclaimed materials. So he's got and green materials as well. So he's got a limecrete floor. He's only just got out of the ground, but he's got a lot of reclaimed timber and stuff like this. So it's as far as I can see, it's going to be mainly timber frame. But there's only a few photos because they haven't got that far. But that's the sort of thing. It would be quite interesting to run.
Absolutely. Run it as a case study and publish the information so that people can see. Because there's so many chunks of information that are coming out on the internet at the moment from the industry as a whole. And when you look at it, there's kind of carbon targets for buildings, and they're all plus 500 tons. And you're thinking, well, where's the challenge? Where's this zero carbon coming from? Where is net, and even net zero? I mean, the net zero thing is just build it with 50 tons of carbon and then do something somewhere else. We've got to focus on real low carbon materials, and the only way you do that is to kind of get to know the materials and their impacts.
Sarah did a flat. Sarah from Salvo did a flat, which was actually carbon negative, and in itself without any offsets at all. So it would be quite interesting to run that through as well.
Yeah, I must try and do that. The challenge always is finding the time to do it or finding the money to do it. But it would be really worthwhile doing, and then publicising it and kind of spreading it all over Green Building Encyclopedia and case studies on the calculator site as well. Love to do that.
Well, okay, so that's not ready just yet, but it will be.
But I mean, his design is probably developed sufficiently that we can start to put it in there, and as he evolves the building and it might change a few material changes, product changes, then those can be embraced. The thing about the calculator is it's a living document, a design and decision tool, which is a living document. So anything that you change at any stage of the way, you can just make the change of the material or the product or the thickness or the method of construction, and it will automatically recalculate everything instantaneously, and you get all the answers instantaneously on the spot. So anyway, the encyclopedia, it's something that I've been working on for at least 10 years, and it came off the back of GreenSpec website, where I got increasingly frustrated with GreenSpec not doing what I wanted it to do. And yet I was funding its development entirely. So I started posting some information up on various websites and discovered that there was an awful lot of interest in CPD material, so continuing professional development seminars. So I started thinking, okay, I'll build a different website with a whole bundle of information to try and educate architects on environmental construction, because there was there's so little education on construction anyway. But then for them to have to kind of switch to a low carbon economy when the whole of the industry is focused on violet construction and never going to switch over, and BREEAM and Code for Green Guide to Specification are fundamentally pointing all in the wrong direction. We needed something better, and something that was easily consumed. So I started building it. So it starts with encyclopedic information, problems and solutions, an ambition to have lots of big open data, design principles, and guidance on elemental assemblies that are competent and minimize environmental impact, and encyclopedic information. And originally I wanted a 3D interface, but I wanted to have a model of a building where you could click any part of the model of the building, and it would interrogate the encyclopedia and just deliver information on screen that you needed to know about. Unfortunately, we haven't got that far, and it's something that's going to cost a lot of money. But in the meantime, I've got hundreds of CPD, and I've written 1,000 hours of CPD material so far, all on environmental construction, specification, procurement, and other stuff. And then Jargon Busters, I've got about 600 pages on Jargon Busters, because we've got to learn the language properly. Otherwise, we keep on talking to each other and confusing each other with acronyms, abbreviations, and words that we don't actually know the meaning of. So we need all of that stuff. And then codes of patterns of design. And then Green Building Learning kind of is a spin out from that. And then sustainability checklist for every trade. Then in addition, then the problems and the solutions are the problem, the solution, what the issues are, rules of thumb, and then move into kind of carbon calculators where rules of thumb aren't big enough. And then there's the core solution providers. So we've got the the manufacturers, the suppliers, the installers, and then the products, the accessories which make up systems. And those 6 parts are the core parts to a solution. If you don't have all 6 parts, you haven't got a solution. And then um, focusing on the products, we've got product assessments, we've got system assessments, we've got product data, we've got green building method statements, we've got green building price books started, but there's an awful lot more that's needed. And then other things like the big open data ambition. So we want lots and lots of data, equations, data sets, calculators, and so those are gradually being built in the Green Building Calculator website, and then design and decision tools, which is primarily where I'm kind of coming from, and it's the retrofit calculator, the Green Building Calculator. It's things like waste cost calculator, which I created some years back when BRE were creating tools that took a week to complete, and I was producing something that could be populated in 5 minutes, and you get an answer, and start to drive the waste minimization ambitions that were kind of prominent to 20 years ago.
Can I just describe what I can see on your very long homepage of Green Building Encyclopedia? Green Building Encyclopedia .uk is the URL. Encyclopedia is spelt Paedia at the end. And on the very first splash screen, there are a load of little discs in different colours with all these things that Brian's been talking about. Most of them anyway, have linked. So they're links from these discs, and it's clustered together in the kind of areas that he's been talking about. So you can get presumably from one of these.
Sadly, the software that the website is built on has this function that you can use things like these circles and click on them, and it'll take you to. But it doesn't. The words and the hyperlink zone do not map properly, so it cannot be turned into a hyperlink, which is what this should have been, a hyperlink straight into the various parts of the website. So I've got to find another way of doing it somehow. There's probably a piece of software out there that can do it, but it's not inside the software that I've built the website on. So slightly infuriating.
Oh, so if anybody looks at your Green Building Encyclopedia, who is of a Web 2 knowledge, has Web 2 knowledge, perhaps, and it's an easy thing to do. Perhaps they could.
Yes, that would be really helpful. If somebody knows how to do that, that'd be fantastic. I'm using what's it called? It's not WordPerfect. What's it called? Anyway, I'm using the most popular website editing tool on the planet, but its functions don't always work when they need to.
Right. I suppose you started using this software years ago.
Yeah,
so,
I built one website and it was doing brilliantly well, and I transferred everything over to this new software because it was more robust and it was the right way to do it. And so this site has been going 10 years, I think, 10 years, and 2,500 pages, I think it is, and still only scraping the surface. There's another 30,000 pages in my head that I need to kind of download.
30,000? Did you say 30,000?
Yes, I did, and I know what's on every one of those pages. So I've already, catalogued what I want to do. The challenge is that it takes time to do it. It's a day. It's at least a day to create a page. And if there's a lot of text in it, there's another, a week of writing in order to kind of get it right. but every now and then somebody asks me to write a paper or ask, I have things like Q&A, questions and answers, where people come to me with a series of questions, and I just have to answer the original question and 10 questions around it. Because if I answer the first question, they'll go off and make a mistake. If I ask and answer questions around the original question, then they have a better idea of the context, and they're more likely to get it right and not drift off and make a mistake by compromising on something. So when I write something like that, somebody says, where do I get timber shingles from? So and then he says, I'm in Cuba. So I have to respond and say, well, if I were in Cuba, this is what I would try to do. And these are the organizations in the UK. You've got to find the equivalent of those in your country. So once you've written something like that up, then you just got to post it up just so that it's useful to somebody else. So there are loads of ambitions to build more data sets, ready-made elemental assemblies of good, competent green construction. And I've got 892 in spreadsheets. I've just got to convert them into more calculator pages and more pages on the website. But it'll keep coming. The calculator is going to preoccupy me a lot. So the encyclopedias sort of not on the back burner, because I try and do something in it every week. I try and put something up, and I try to feed Buffer. Buffer wants one new page or one altered, updated page every day, so I try and feed that, which is a bit challenging, but it's good to do it.
Sounds brilliant. And it looks good. I mean, the page, if you can see it, is very colourful, and it's divided into these categories. So could you choose another disc which and explain how to get, and any other disc that goes somewhere, and tell me how to get from that disc to where I want to get to.
On the home page, if you scroll down a short way, it has a list of all of the popular pages, and many, if not all, of these in the little diagram are listed further down in that list of popular pages, and there are hyperlinks that take you to a navigation page on that particular topic. So click any one of those words, it takes you to a navigation page, and the navigation page is everything to do with the word that you've just clicked on is listed there. When I created this, I was talking about neural networks and the way the brain works, because every time you learn something, it stitches together prior knowledge with new knowledge, and it's done in an intelligent way that it's all joined up. And I wanted the website to do exactly the same thing, that any topic you could click on a page, one of the neural networks, and on that it has all of the links to all of the other relevant topics everywhere else in the website, because it's spread all over the place. Information is in different categories, and if you have to go down menus to find things and then come up one menu, back down a different menu to find something, it's tedious and you never find anything. If I've listed everything that's relevant to any particular page, then you don't have to go searching. It's all listed there, easy, click through. So that's because an encyclopedia is big and you don't want to go through alphabetical order to find something, but you can also do alphabetical order because I have those lists too.
Excellent. Well, look, that is very interesting, and I look forward to seeing the progress on the calculator, and I will get in there and try and mess around with the encyclopedia, see what I can find.
And of course, any information that's on Salvo website, we could have thousands of links to your Salvo website that would be beneficial to feed more people in your direction, but maybe feed some back in our direction as well, if that made any sense.
Yeah, we've got a few sort of on Salvo Web, the salvoweb.com. We've got directories of dealers around the world, and they're all split up by country and state or county or département if you're in France. And we also have items for sale that get put on our system, and demolition alerts and various other things. But they're all just sort of areas of our website. And in addition to that, we do a monthly newsletter and news stories. So, and they can be on any topic. They're on a random sort of selection of topics. It's all searchable, but
we need. I mean, I'm pretty sure we've got a fair bit of information, because we did so much work on reclaim, reuse, recycling 24 years ago with some government funding. I think you're on one on the steering groups from memory, which is probably where we met anyway. So we've got pages where we've got supplier pages, we've got product pages, we've got material pages. All of those can have links back to architectural salvage and Salvo, and so we need to kind of do that just to kind of reinforce our activities.
Yeah.
There's one thing that I noticed in the public domain yesterday, I think it was the final report of your European funded project has just been published. Is that worth a mention?
Yeah. Yes, we've done in fact, I wrote a news item about that, which went out this week or last week. Excuse me. Yes, it's quite interesting, because the way that project worked, it was a 5-year project in the end. When we joined it at the outset, it was a 3-year project, and we stuck with the 3 years and did our what we agreed to do, and it all went well. But then halfway through the 3 years, they decided to extend it to a 5-year project. And they invited a load of other people, well, not a load, a few other people in, and a few of the original partners dropped out, and that included us, because we couldn't afford to do 5 years, 3 years stretch. And so that doc that you've seen is the end of the 5-year session. And there's some interesting stuff on there.
Remind us of the name of the project, because it's quite a challenging acronym.
Yes, it's facilitating the circulation of reclaimed building elements. FCRBE. And try as we might, we couldn't get them to agree as simpler acronym, or one that was more accurately to describe, because reclaimed building elements, as far as we're concerned in England, would be an entire mezzanine floor, the supports, the floor, or an entire facade, all the windows and doors and masonry and everything. So that's what an element is, as far as I understand it. Whereas actually they're talking about reclaimed products and material. So, but they wouldn't change it. So what I'm trying to do is to do these regular second Tuesday of the month podcasts, so that they will be the live version on X, on Spaces on X, so that other people are able to join in, and that will be recorded and put out as a podcast subsequently. This chat we've had today is recorded, and I shall wrap it up in a format that we can then podcast. It's very nice to hear you, and we'll sign off.
Well, thanks ever so much for the opportunity to present the calculation, the encyclopedia. It's very kind of you, and we must do more of this.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
Thank you.
Good. Okay.
Thanks, Thornton. Good luck. See you again in a month.
Cheerio.
13th. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Leave.